Coming up, exactly what Alabama did not need. Another injury to another linebacker. We'll give you all the details next, right here on SEC Country Live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. This is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. Speaking of Alabama, we begin, before we get to our first and 10 today, the news we expected to talk about around the SEC with a bit of relatively late-breaking news around the league as Alabama linebacker Terrell Lewis, a guy that had a tackle, a sack in the overtime period of the college football playoff national championship game, a guy that figured heavily into the plans of brand new Bama defensive coordinator Tosh Lupoi and Alabama coach Nick Saban's plans here for 2018. Those put on hold for right now. Yep. Another injury to another Alabama linebacker. It was the story of the season for 2017, and a couple days after Alabama lost another linebacker, dismissing Darius Guice for very different reasons than what Lewis is dealing with here. More bad news for the Alabama Crimson Tide. This is a tough blow to a Crimson Tide defense, Mike, is it not?
Yeah, it really stinks. And when you look at a guy like Terrell Lewis and think about really all the talent that Bama's going to have at the edge rusher position, this was the guy that was named the starter. I mean, it's Terrell Lewis over Christian Miller, over Anthony Jennings, over anybody else you really want to put in that role. So I think that's what makes this such a tough blow. Last year, he also had the elbow ligament injury in the Florida State game. That really derailed his year before it got going. Now you move forward, he tears his knee in really a non-contact drill as far as the offseason goes, and it just absolutely stinks for the kid.
We'll tell you what we know about this, and then I'll kind of get into my opinions, how I feel that this impacts Alabama. Let me start here with Aaron Suttles on Twitter, who tweeted out, Aaron Suttles, a longtime reporter covering the Alabama Crimson Tide, the statement from Alabama coach Nick Saban, who says Terrell Lewis suffered a torn right ACL last week while training. He underwent successful surgery today, and a time frame for his return is unknown at this time. Mike, as a former player, I guess I'll ask you about this. The notion that while you are training in the summer, this is not practice, this is, any kind of workouts, for the most part are voluntarily, although it's voluntary with air quotes around it. You ain't playing
right.
If you ain't working out in the summer. I mean, walk me through what Lewis has probably been doing here,
right,
and just how uncommon it would be to have an injury like this suffered during kind of a non-contact portion of the year.
Yeah, you hear about two different kinds of injuries, right? When it comes to the ACL, when it comes to the knee, it's usually some guy either fell on your knee and something happened that ruptured a tendon, ruptured a ligament down there in the knee, or there's also the possibility that the change of direction kind of things happen. That's exactly what this is. It's change of direction, it's running sprints, it's running drills, it's trying to turn the corner on some of these edge rushing drills they do, and evidently something just popped. And obviously, that's very bad news for Terrell Lewis and this Alabama football team, but I don't think, when you look at it, I don't think there's anything that they could have changed or prevented from happening.
Jamal Nettles in the Facebook comment section, remembering what you had mentioned before, the another injury that Lewis had suffered during the Florida State game there. So already in our Facebook comment section, people remembering kind of some of the stuff that Lewis already dealt with. Speaking of Lewis, he himself on Twitter put out a message immediately after his surgery here as he goes to work in repairing that knee. Lewis tweeting out that surgery went well. I appreciate all the well wishes and support. God has something for me on the other side of this. It's greater than what I can see right now. So please don't feel sorry for me in my situation. I'm a warrior. What God has in store for me can't be denied. Thank you to all. And obviously that's a really hopeful, optimistic message on the part of Terrell Lewis there. If you're an Alabama fan or just really a fan of college football, you have to like that.
No, you definitely do. And this is something that I've actually personally, been a part of, where you battle back from an injury that's a really devastating injury. You spend all offseason getting back. You say, man, I can't wait to take the field with my brothers and my teammates. And then something else happens that derails your next season. This happened to me a couple of times when I was with the Falcons. So it definitely stinks. I'm glad the guy's in high spirits. I'm glad he's in high hopes. I think with the way ACL injuries are nowadays, I think that he should, keep his opportunities open when it comes to this coming season. There's no doubt it's a blow for him personally as well as along with the football team.
Our buddy Cole Slaw on the Facebook comment section says, I'm sorry the young man is hurt, but Nick is so deep at linebacker, he's not terribly worried, and if he is, he's going to poach somebody else's top linebacker recruit. I don't know that I would state this exactly the same way Cole Slaw did, but I do kind of agree with this a bit. Now, I don't know that Alabama is as deep at linebacker as it has been, just given the number of injuries that it dealt with. Even last year when Christian Miller was dealing with his situation, when Sean Deion Hamilton was dealing with his situation, even Alabama's prodigious depth was, I think, pretty well challenged by the number of injuries they suffered. I think 2018, it's a bit the same kind of thing here, but overall, for me, this is a bigger deal for Terrell Lewis personally than it is for the Alabama team collectively here, because of the fact that Alabama is just not the kind of program that's defined by any one player. If you look at Georgia in 2017, had Roquan Smith gotten hurt for Georgia in 2017, it would have been devastating for the Bulldogs. Jeff Holland for Auburn, the great pass rusher from Auburn from a season ago. Had he gotten hurt last year, it would have been devastating for Auburn. Alabama is not really defined by any one player like that, and it's really not Terrell Lewis. Now, obviously, we all hope that Lewis gets healthy and gets back on a football field soon, but it's more about him missing a chance to contribute to Alabama than it is Alabama missing out on a contribution that it needed, because I think most of the people here are, whether it be Bama fans or non-Alabama fans, I don't know that anyone looks in on what's happened here with Terrell Lewis and says, well, that's it, I guess Alabama's going to be done. They're the kind of program, this is one that Nick Saban gets so much credit for what he's done on the recruiting trail, they're the kind of program built to withstand injuries.
No, they definitely are. And listen, I think his depth was definitely tested last year. When you looked at all the injuries, you said, boy, how are they going to come up with somebody else? And at times, they'd had trouble. You had to move Rashaan Evans to a rush-in spot. You had to have different ways to go about it. Jamie Mosley, somebody who you didn't think would be seeing time last year at the rush-in position, absolutely had to step in. And so I think there's a couple of different things mixed in that you say, boy, this could be really tough. Remember, Anthony Jennings, for a lot of Bama fans will remember, he actually tore his knee up in the Sugar Bowl playing Clemson down there. So he's coming back off another injury as well. Christian Miller supposedly getting back to health, but you hope that he gets back to a spot. I look at a guy like Eyabi Anoma, the five-star, kind of rush in that Bama signed last year. How soon can he get on the field? How soon can he contribute? Otherwise, you're looking at Jamie Mosley again, Chris Allen. Then Darius Cohen would have been one of those guys. Now he's out of the picture now as well.
We'll remind you, Cowan was dismissed from the team earlier this week, an announcement made by Nick Saban that we covered here on SEC Country Live. Couple of YouTube comments, then I want to talk a little bit about something very interesting that Dan Mullen has had to say. Logan Westerman in the YouTube comment section says that my audio is a little bit messed up. Maybe if you're hearing the same thing Logan is, let me know in the comment section. I'll toggle with my microphone a bit if I need to, if y'all are having a hard time hearing me there today. Tyler Mann, also in the YouTube comment section, who is an LSU fan, says prayers to Terrell Lewis for a healthy recovery. And that's one of the things I like about our show. Tyler's an LSU fan. We got a bunch of fans watching in, but nobody roots for injuries. Nobody roots for guys to be hurt. We all like, taking jabs at each other's teams back and forth. But when it comes to these kind of injuries and things like this is about more than just football. You hope to see a guy like this go through his recovery. We all like it best, at least I do, when it's sort of all hands on deck in the SEC. The league's better when it works.
No, and that's the thing, is at the end of the day, we all wear our colors on our sleeves. I mean, you see, the shirts, obviously, both of us are wearing today, but these are, at the end of the day, these are college students. These are athletes trying to make a name for themselves, trying to get to the next level, trying to make money, trying to do right by their family. And it stinks that not only once, but now 2 years in a row, he's suffered an injury that's really going to keep him out for the year.
So both Lincoln Nail and Diedrich Frazier says my microphone sounds weird. Let me play with it a little bit or something like that. Y'all let me know.
I love what he says.
Lincoln Nail sounds like I'm at the end of a tunnel or something like that.
I love
Maybe some of y'all are just finally glad you don't have to hear me quite as much. Maybe some of y'all are happy about that.
Yeah, I love that he says it sounds like you're at the end of a tunnel, BA. That's pretty good stuff.
The problem is, I think some of you, if I was at the end of a tunnel, you hope there's a train on the other side getting ready to run me over. I think that's what some of you kind of hope for on that. But nonetheless, we'll see if we can get that figured out and taken care of. It's good to have you with us here today on SEC Country Live. Now let's move on and get ready to talk about the stuff that we planned on talking about here. It's our first and 10 list. We do it every day here on SEC Country Live. And item number 1 on our first and 10 list, Florida coach Dan Mullen was actually in Georgia yesterday, maybe enemy territory to a certain extent, a part of Arizona Cardinals coach Bruce Arians' celebrity golf tournament. Arians just retired from the Arizona Cardinals, but he's a guy that lives on a nice swank lake about an hour and a half or so from Atlanta. Dan Mullen there to participate in the golf tournament, and the subject comes up of, now that Mullen has gone from the SEC West to the SEC East, has the balance of power now also started to shift between the West and the East? And Mullen apparently thinks that it has. Let me show you a little bit of video captured by our buddy Mike Griffith of Dan Mullen talking.
You know what? It's going to be different because, it's just not having played. I mean, we got to play Kentucky every year. Played for the last couple of years. Then you rotate and play one team. So I know the depth of the West is always tough, and what makes it really hard. But it looks like they're. It seems the power might be shifting to the East. I was in 9 years in Mississippi. The West won the championship every single year. And now, as soon as I moved to the East, 2 days later, I think the East won it again. So I seem to be on the winning side every year.
Caught us right there.
Caught us in the
Trying to fix the microphone.
I think we figured out what's wrong with the microphone here. Somehow mine wasn't plugged in. So let me plug this in here. And now let's see if you can hear me a lot better. Listen, we're all just rolling with the punches right here. We're doing
It really
the best
is.
we can. Nonetheless, that's Florida coach Dan Mullen there, talking about the situation with the SEC West, the SEC East. It's probably fair to point out here that Mullen, I think, is mostly joking, although he has a pretty dry sense of humor on that. He seems to be saying that there's a shift in power here from the SEC West, the SEC East. I'm not even sure if I take him serious on this too much. Do you see a sort of a shift from West to East here?
I don't, and I love that Dan Mullen's saying this. I think this is what Dan Mullen should say when it's when you're coming from the West to the East and you're becoming the Florida head coach, but. I look at this and I look at last year, and we brought this number up a ton of times, right? 12-2. It's one of those things where the West versus the East hasn't looked any better. And I honestly look at the schedule and the way it matches up this year and look at the talented football teams that should be talented coming out of the East, and I don't see any slam dunks for the East. I really don't. When you look at who Florida's going to match up against, LSU, Mississippi State, when you look at South Carolina matching up against Texas A&M, when you look at the fact that Arkansas gets Mizzou and Vanderbilt in their cross-division games, I think that in a couple of years it'll be there. But for right now, I don't think the gap is shrinking at all. I think Georgia's good, and obviously they're going to be good, but I don't even count either one of their games as a slam dunk win for the East when you look at Auburn and when you look at going to Baton Rouge to play LSU.
Dietrich Frazier kind of taking a bit of a jab at Dan Mullen saying, wait, is he saying he won the SEC just because he happened to be in the division where it was all won? And obviously some Georgia fans like Dietrich are going to have a bit of an issue with that. I guess here's the only argument I can make for the SEC East getting stronger. For a long time, and it has been a long time, you probably have to go back before 2017, you probably have to go back to 2008, 2009 to find an SEC East team that would have been capable of winning the entire league. Even the best East teams, like, say, South Carolina in 2010, Georgia in 2012. I guess Georgia in 2012, there's an argument to be made here. But for the most part, the SEC East winner was not a team that you could think of as sort of a reasonable SEC champion. Not the back-to-back Missouri teams from 2013 and 2014, not the back-to-back Florida teams from 2015, 2016. These were not teams that could have won the entire SEC. They can win a division by default if there's no other elite team there, but they're not good enough to be an SEC champion, a representative in a college football playoff. Georgia last year in 2017 kind of changed that. Georgia last year was not only a team that was good enough to win the SEC, it did, but it could have won the national championship. So from that standpoint, Georgia, I think, has ushered in a brand new era of, hey, finally there's an East team that's good enough to compete with the single best team from the SEC West. And you can maybe make a case that South Carolina has also given the East something it hasn't had in a while, which is sort of a second top 25 team. I do believe the Gamecocks will be ranked in the top 25 virtually all season here in 2018. That's a level of depth that the East hasn't had in a while. But in terms of the overall balance between the West and the East, I sort of suggested last year that it might be changing. I don't know that it looks like it's changing right now because I still don't think that Florida's very good. I don't think that Tennessee's very good. I don't think that Missouri's very good. And I've just given you virtually half the division right there before I even get to Vanderbilt and Kentucky.
Yeah, and to me, this sits squarely on the shoulders of Tennessee. I mean, it really does. I think when you look at Tennessee and you look what their schedule possibly, and I just made the comment that I don't think any SEC East team has a definite victory over any SEC West team. When you see them line up, you just don't see it. But I think that sits squarely on Tennessee because Tennessee just hasn't been good in a few years. You can't have a Tennessee team go 0-8 in the SEC and say, hey, the East is on its way back. That's a Tennessee team that's going to have to play Auburn. That's a Tennessee team that's going to have to play Alabama. You've got to put up more of a fight in those games if the SEC East is going to become what they are. I know the argument's made for South Carolina, but South Carolina, to me, gets their wins because of how down the SEC East is.
Lincoln Dale in the YouTube comment section says he didn't mind not hearing my microphone if I'm not going to talk more about Arkansas than I do in a typical day. I got good news for you, Lincoln. We're actually going to talk some Hogs later on in the program. I think you'll like that. For now, though, on this subject, once again, Tyler Mann in the YouTube comment section says about the balance between the East and the West, that the East has never been farther from the West than it is right now. After Georgia, who's next? Arguments can be made for South Carolina and Florida, even Tennessee, but those teams aren't close to Georgia. In one respect, Tyler's right that there's really only one true championship contender in the East, that's Georgia. But I would argue that as South Carolina rises up as the second team in the SEC East, there's something important going on in the SEC West. Folks, it's not as good as it used to be. Now, in 2014, you had every team in the SEC West that was in at least a conversation of potentially being a top 25 team. I guess Arkansas would have probably been the only school that didn't have at least some top 25 consideration in 2014. That's a long time ago now. Now in the SEC West, what do you have? You have Alabama, who's a national championship reigning champ, contender again in 2018. Auburn probably is. But you know, LSU's not as good as it used to be. You know, I think the A&M will eventually be good, but for the first year of Jimbo Fisher, there's probably a bit of a wait-and-see approach there. The two Mississippi schools don't have their best teams, with all due respect to the people who seem to be really high on Mississippi State. I mean, the SEC West is not as good as it once was, so part of the growing balance, if it is taking place between the two divisions, is the fact that the West is sort of moving down to the level, at least meeting the SEC East at the level that it once was here. That is also part of the story, I think.
I got to push back on that a little bit, though, because we're going to talk about the rise of South Carolina. To me, we have to talk about the rise of Mississippi State. I mean, I think that kind of mirrors each other. And while
this all is based on your opinion. I think that South Carolina's a top 25 team. I think Mississippi State largely won't be. And all I'm saying here is the SEC West compared to its strongest year, which probably was 2014, a year when Ole Miss and Mississippi State and all these teams had cups of coffee ranked very highly. That, to me, it's not that version of the SEC West.
I'll go there with you too, and I understand where you're coming from when you're saying that. But to me, I think Texas A&M, as far as strengthening for the next couple of years, if Dan Mullen's saying the SEC East is meeting them, I mean, I look at Texas A&M, I look at what they could possibly do, and I look at Mississippi State that could reach new heights in the next couple of years. We're not sure yet. Those two teams kind of all set for me, anything happening in the East. Yes, we think Jeremy Pruitt might end up doing a good job, but Tennessee was 0-8 last year. Yes, we think Dan Mullen might be the right fit at Florida, but again, that's a 4-win Florida team from a year ago that didn't go to a bowl game and that got routed by Missouri. And so I think that there might be some catching up due to the regression of the West, but I don't think by any means that the East has made up any ground.
Rick Keene, who's a Florida fan in our Facebook comment section, says, look, I understand the Gators have a lot to prove, but there are going to be a lot of eyebrows raised about the Gators this year. And obviously, that's kind of the interesting subtext to what Dan Mullen was talking about there. Even if he's sort of half kidding when he says that the East is catching up with the West, I think most people would look at Florida, a traditional power by almost any estimation, one of the top programs in the SEC over the last couple of decades. How about the Gators do something to raise the profile of the SEC East? Even in those back-to-back division winners for Jim McElwain, I don't know that Florida changed a whole lot of minds because they go to Arkansas in what would have been 2014 or 2015, I forget the year. They go to Arkansas and just get clobbered in an East-West crossover. They're not scoring very many points. Even in the good Florida teams of the last half-decade, they really haven't done a ton to sort of change the perception of the SEC East because they weren't beating SEC West teams enough.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And listen, I pointed to Tennessee a minute ago. It has to be Tennessee. They've got to put up more of a fight. I just don't think this is the year. Them playing Auburn and Alabama out of the West, I don't think it's the year. So then you move on to a Florida and say, boy, who are they lined up against? Well, they're going to be playing Mississippi State in Starkville. It's going to be a tough game, and they're playing LSU again. And so South Carolina, to me, is the team that could possibly be that torchbearer for somebody else behind Georgia. Obviously, they have the talent there, but can they get it done? Because they're playing Texas A&M at home, and I think their other crossover opponent is Ole Miss. They've got to win that game. If the SEC East wants to talk about being close to the West, South Carolina has to go on the road and beat Ole Miss in Oxford, Mississippi.
Now, let me move on now. Speaking of the SEC West, let's talk about item number 2 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And I think one of the topics that we have had ongoing on the show for a while now is what looks to be some growing pressure on LSU coach Ed Orgeron. As an example of some of the pressure that Orgeron's facing, I want to go back in time to a couple of weeks ago. Do you remember when Les Miles, the former LSU coach, goes on a radio station in Houston, Texas to talk about his old school, LSU, and at the time, he kind of poked at Orgeron a little bit for what Miles believed was Ed Orgeron asking for patience from LSU fans. Whatever it was that Miles thought he had heard from Orgeron did not sit well with the Hatter. Take a listen to this as a setup here.
I never accepted the feeling of, hey, you need to have patience. When you say that you need to have patience, aren't you really just saying to your team you're not good enough? Because I want you to know something. I never took the field with the Tigers where I didn't think I was absolutely going to kick somebody's tail and that we were the best team. Period. I don't give a shit. It took me a time in the week to get myself in a position where I said, yeah, okay, we got it. We got the plan. The plan is in. We're ready to play. Yeah, that took some time. But I never asked for, hey, give me a break here. Hey, listen, the Tigers are good. Tigers got good players. Tigers can play. Hey, you know what? We didn't make any mistakes. You guys are going to play your butts off this Saturday, and you're going to kick the living hell out of the opponent, and that's just the way it is. This is our day. This is not their day. Are you kidding me? You are the Tigers. So I always felt differently than, certain people need to have a safety net. If you need a safety net, you need not coach for the Tigers, because the Tigers are your safety net.
So as unhinged as former LSU coach Les Miles sounds in that audio from his recent Houston radio interview, when the former coach that occupied your job is saying that about you, you've got mounting pressure. Someone who apparently agrees with that is CBS Sports' Dennis Dodd. We talked yesterday about the USA Today list of coaches in the hot seat who they only sort of paid attention to Barry Odom at Missouri. We said yesterday, wait, is Odom the only SEC hot seat coach right now? And, well, Dennis Dodd seems to disagree. He looks at Ed Orgeron as potentially a guy that's very much in the hot seat, moving him. Now, this is something that Dennis Dodd from CBS Sports does every year. He has his hot seat rankings, level 1 all the way through 5. Last year, Ed Orgeron was just at a level 2. Safe for now was the status that Dennis Dodd from CBS gave Ed Orgeron, but he's moved him up to level 4. He skipped a level, all the way up to level 4. All of a sudden, he's got to win in a hurry here. That's the evaluation from Dennis Dodd when it comes to Ed Orgeron. When you think back to what Les Miles said and kind of everything else that the conversations happening around LSU, do you view Ed Orgeron as being a hot seat status coach?
I don't foresee Ed Orgeron being fired this year unless it's just terrible. Unless they don't agree with that. Unless they don't get to a bowl game. I think that's the only way you look at what could possibly happen for LSU this year and say, boy, they really have to only win like 5, maybe 6 games in order for him to really get fired because of the Joe Oliva situation for me. The way things shape up around that program, I don't think you get rid of him just yet. I will say this about Ed Orgeron, though. This has been the most up and down offseason in terms of the way you think about a coach that I think that we've covered in terms of the 14 SEC programs out there. Because if you remember, it was like Orgeron finished strong last year. They got to 9 wins. They almost won their bowl game. And then it's like, man, it really wasn't a great signing day for LSU. They started losing a number of kids. They didn't close as strong as they thought. Then all of a sudden we've bounced back, and you've heard about Terrence Alexander and Joe Burrow and all these people that can be contributing in this program that maybe he didn't sign on signing day. So it starts to trend back in the upward direction. I think the LSU fans that we've talked to in our comment section for the most part are just in wait and see mode. I don't see anybody saying, boy, I'm ride or die with Coach O. He's our guy. He's going to be our guy for the next 10, 20 years. It's kind of, boy, I really hope things work out. And Steve Ensminger is what we think he can be, and Joe Burrow ends up being what we think he can be, and we find a running back and some great offensive linemen and hope things work out.
We got a lot of comments, and a lot of them are very good. I want to roll through a lot of these. Let me start on YouTube, where Cliff Nelson says, if Orgeron loses to both Miami and Auburn, they, meaning LSU fans, will be calling for his head. He has to win one or both of those early games. And I do think there's a nature in which this is true. That Miami LSU season opener, LSU is going to be a point spread underdog here. But there's nothing about this Miami team, a team that lost to Pittsburgh last year when Miami had everything in the world to play for. There's nothing about this Miami team that makes you think they should definitely be beating LSU. That's a winnable game for LSU and something that's close to a must-win. And the Auburn game, even though I personally think that Auburn's better than LSU, that's also a game that LSU won a year ago, and that's a rivalry game and a bit of a sort of perpetual hot seat game for both the coaches, whichever coaches it may be involved in that game. That's another crucial game that LSU will play early in the season.
Yeah, and I hope that obviously that starts some consistency on Ed Orgeron, because that's been the thing for me. How consistent is Ed Orgeron? When you look at the season, and I mentioned the term hollow. You had some of these hollow numbers yesterday when you look at these college football teams, and in a couple of ways, LSU had a little bit of a hollow season. I mean, if they beat Troy, which they should have beaten, that's a 10-win football team, and I think that's what makes it so crazy to look at the season last year and say, boy, he could possibly be on the hot seat. When you flip that game around, things look a lot different. But they have to play with more consistency, I think, is the issue for a lot of LSU fans.
Joshua Rogers, also in the YouTube comment section, says Coach Ed Orgeron must win the Miami game to keep his job, kind of echoing what others have said in the comment section here. Shannon Burgess, though, pumping the brakes on all of this, saying it's way too soon to start saying that about Coach Orgeron. And listen, I kind of agree with Shannon on this for the most part. I think that LSU fans could be in a really bad mood come the end of the 2018 season, but I think it would be such a huge setback for LSU to say we're going to have to sort of blow this up and reboot this entire thing. The only thing that I could see maybe happening is what Tyler Mann also said in the YouTube comment section, which is maybe it's Joe Oliva who also loses his job. But at that point in time, Orgeron and Oliva has something of a package deal. Yeah. Maybe they're both gone.
Well, here's what I will say about LSU fans to say, man, it's really still early in the tenure for Orgeron to be thinking about him getting fired. Here's what I will say, and it doesn't look like this is going to happen because it looks like they have a very strong class. It's number 3 right now. They could end up having the number 1 class. But if that class goes south, if they lose some games that they shouldn't lose somewhere along the line, if they do get around that 6-win mark, and some of these guys are at the top of their board in terms of commitments or signees start saying, hey, I'm not really sure about this LSU thing. I think that's what becomes scary for LSU fans because I think that's a slippery slope. I think getting a coach in while you still have a talented roster could end up being a big deal to where Joe Oliva looks at it and says, boy, we still have a talented roster for now, but if we wait another year or two, could Ed Orgeron keep bringing in that talented roster? I think that's what makes it a tough decision.
Let me give you a couple of our Facebook comments here because I think they're interesting too. Talmadge Thomas says, really LSU's just a quarterback away, and I know you all think we've heard that before, but Talmadge says if you look at the other positions, they're actually pretty well comparable with what Alabama has going for it. Do you think LSU, apart from quarterback, and we don't yet know about Joe Burrow, but do you think LSU, apart from quarterback, is sort of from a talent standpoint, comparable to Alabama and the best programs in the SEC? We'll find out in October because Georgia also goes there.
I think when you look at their defenses, in a lot of ways, their defenses could mirror each other. Yeah. I think that obviously having Greedy Williams back there is a big thing. That's not something Alabama has right now as a lockdown corner. But it's the offensive side of the ball for me, and really the running game that I think really raises my antennas. And I talked to a couple of you guys about this before. In terms of number of games started, LSU is the least experienced offensive line in the SEC. They're relying on a couple of guys to come in and be immediate contributors from that signing class last year. Add that to the fact that we really don't know if there's a star running back. I mean, Tay Pruvens could be that guy. I know there's a couple of other names out there, but I think all the other positions, yes, you can make that argument, except for the offensive line and the running game.
Facebook, Chris Kelly on Facebook, our comment section says, do not compare LSU's talent level to Alabama. Something else that Chris Kelly mentioned is he thinks that Ed Orgeron is what makes LSU a non-threat here this season. And I would slightly disagree with that because I'm not so sure that Ed Orgeron has any impact on this season for LSU. If Steve Ensminger is a good offensive coordinator hire, LSU may be fine. We think that Dave Aranda is a very good defensive coordinator, but for me, LSU's fate's going to be decided by those two coordinators. I'm not quite sure, other than some sort of rousing pregame speech, I'm not really quite sure what impact Ed Orgeron has on this thing at all.
Well, it's going to be Ed Orgeron staying out of it, right? Yeah. I mean, that's the impact that Ed Orgeron's going to have is, hey, staying out of it, because obviously that.
But he seems like the kind of coach that's very comfortable with that. Compare him to Gus Malzahn, that wants to tinker in his offense, wants to be hands-on with his coaching. Honestly, I'm not so sure Ed Orgeron's curious enough to want to tinker.
Well, I mean, that was the issue coming out last year with Matt Canada, was it not? It's like, hey, Ed Orgeron was tired of the speed sweeps. He was tired of everything that was going on, tried to tinker in the game plan for the Troy game and some of the other things going on. And then Matt Canada's out of the job by the end of the year.
I don't want to like get too lost in the semantics here, but having a problem with somebody else's idea is a lot different than having an idea of your own.
Right, no, I agree with that. That's what I'm saying. The biggest thing for Ed Orgeron, the only way he could make an impact is just getting too far into things. Ed Orgeron knows his role, though, I think.
All right, item number 3 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. You know, last year, Nick Saban gave us a phrase that I think is going to live in the annals of college football for many years to come. It's all based on the idea of getting a lot of positive attention for your team. Normally, you'd think pats in the backs, compliments, that's all good. For Nick Saban, he doesn't like that kind of stuff. In fact, for the media, who he thinks has tossed too much of that in his direction, he said, you know what, you kind of remind me, well, you remember exactly what Saban says it reminds him of. Here's a reminder from back during the season.
I'm trying to get our players to listen to me instead of listening to you guys. You know, all that stuff you write about how good we are and all that stuff they hear on ESPN, it's like poison. You know what I mean? It's like taking poison, like rat poison. All right, so I'm asking them, are you going to listen to me or are you going to listen to these guys about how good you are?
So that's Nick Saban saying, I don't like the idea of rat poison. I don't like the idea of the media saying, talking about how good you're going to be. And if Saban doesn't like all that kind of stuff, he's not going to like what Brett McMurphy has recently tweeted. McMurphy, a longtime college football reporter. Let me show you here from his Twitter account. According to the Las Vegas Superbook, which is sort of the big online, or I shouldn't even say online, the big sports book, the Westgate Superbook there in Las Vegas, Nevada. Here are the odds to win the SEC. Alabama, 5-8, meaning that Vegas views it much more likely that Alabama wins the SEC than not. Compare that to Georgia, which is a little less than 2-1. Auburn at 7-1. Mississippi State at 12-1. Florida and LSU both 18-1, and then you can see the rest of the long shots there. It's a little bit staggering to see Alabama in a league where I spend a lot of time talking about Georgia and Auburn and South Carolina and some of these other teams. We talk about these other folks, but from a Vegas standpoint, they say, listen, it's almost 2-1 that Alabama will win the SEC.
Yeah, it's crazy
compared to anything else. That is a huge level of favorite status for an Alabama team that, by the way, did not win the SEC a year ago. So just for a moment, let's take the folks in Las Vegas at their word. Alabama's a huge SEC favorite. Is there anything that could prevent Alabama from winning the SEC? If Alabama doesn't hoist that trophy in Atlanta in December, what do you think keeps them from doing it?
There's a ton of things that could keep Alabama from hoisting that trophy, and we saw it a year ago, and you've seen it multiple times if you're an Alabama fan, that sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. And I think that the biggest concern is that somebody else from the West runs the table and is able to knock off, just like it happened last year with Auburn. I think that's the biggest concern for Alabama fans is, listen, I don't know how much pushback some of these teams. So if one of these teams gets hot in the right situation, be it in Auburn, be it a crazy Texas A&M, LSU kind of thing going on, that's what can scare an Alabama. One of these teams that really gets things rolling in the right direction, or it could be a Georgia that meets them in an SEC championship game and is really playing on an elite level and is really ready to make a push for a national title and knocks them off that way.
So what you're arguing, other than the Georgia point, but the point about the other SEC West competition feels to me more like an argument for why Alabama might lose a game more so than why Alabama might miss out on the SEC West. Let me explain what I mean by that. It's obviously one thing to say, okay, Alabama could trip up and lose. Virtually any opponent on any given Saturday, to sort of borrow an old cliche, could potentially beat Alabama. But do you see another team in the SEC West that could then be good enough to take advantage of that head-to-head win against Alabama and then beat the rest of the teams? Auburn could beat Alabama, although the game being in Tuscaloosa makes that less likely. But the fact that Auburn has to also go to Georgia seems to open the door back up for Alabama to lose a game but still win the SEC. After all, even the best Alabama teams have a tendency not to go undefeated. Yeah. So you just laid out a case in which Alabama might lose. That's entirely possible. But how about the case for why Alabama might lose enough to then not win the SEC? Other than Georgia just being sort of better than Las Vegas thinks, that's where the argument gets pretty tough on Alabama's perspective here.
I think it does, and I think that's why they're so favored. Mm-hmm. Because when you look at who could possibly knock them off in the West, it took something monumental for Auburn to be able to do that last year, to be able to beat Georgia and Alabama at home. And you think about it, that's exactly what LSU would have to pull off this year. One of those names that always pops up in terms of talent to say, hey, boy, if they can put it together, they really could make a run. They're going to have to beat Georgia and Alabama at home this year as well if they're able to pull it off. And then you add in the fact that Auburn has to play both of those football teams. You add in the fact that Texas A&M could make a run, but Texas A&M is still one of those kind of unknown commodities. That's why you see it so lumped on the side of Alabama. It's not just talking about how good Alabama could be. It's the fact that the people that are usually at the top of those rankings with them in the West have some really, really tough games ahead of them.
I mean, as a Georgia fan, and I am, you see the red and black Dog Nation shirt that I have got on right now. I think the hope that Georgia fans have here, which is the number 2 team on this list, at least according to the Las Vegas Superbook, is that Vegas and a lot of the odds makers and the writers that write about this stuff don't realize how good the young incoming talent to Georgia is. A lot of those guys, they're going to be in the field in place of the famous names that folks learned a year ago, like Roquan Smith and like Nick Chubb and Sony Michel, that there is a level of young, rising up talent at Georgia that Las Vegas just hasn't seen on film, so therefore can't tabulate into the odds. To me, that's the best hope for a Georgia fan, but it's also, I believe, the best hope for an SEC fan that's just sort of tired of Alabama. Georgia being better with young talent than Las Vegas thinks may be your only hope here to keep this from being a very boring SEC season like a lot of these NASCAR races where it's sort of decided before you even start the first lap.
Right. No, and I see what you're saying, and I agree with you to an extent. The kickback I'll have against that is I feel like almost every school kind of feels like, boy, when we get this guy, I mean, even Arkansas, boy, you could have a quarterback in your signing class. Bama's going to have a couple of guys, maybe an edge rusher, maybe Pastrana at corner. I think if anybody has really had their signing class talked about, it's been Georgia. Like I feel like their signing
no, you don't get to rat poison Georgia over there.
No, what I'm saying, I feel like
you know what you're right now. You're just like Jazz Hatcher in the comment section who says that BA is going to eat Georgia's rat poison. See,
no, I'm not trying to rat poison. What I'm trying to say is, I think every school has that argument of, boy, wait till they see this next round of people. They haven't seen them come. If anybody's school has had a publicized group of freshmen coming in, it's definitely Georgia this year.
Yeah, but Vegas is not factoring that in because Vegas is gonna look at that as, well, we hear about big time freshmen every single year.
Right. Well,
and for Georgia, it's not so much the freshmen as it's the sophomores, the redshirt freshmen, that could really make the biggest on-field difference.
I think my point when it comes to all these odds-making things, and every time we talk about Vegas is this, and I try to bring this up as much as I can. These people are not making making these odds so that they're kind of, boy, we're making these odds because we really think. They're making these odds to get people to move money. And I think that's the reason you see some of these rankings. I mean, listen, if we're putting money down, Florida and LSU sitting there at 18-1 and South Carolina at Texas A&M and 30-1, to me, that's all about money. It's like, hey, let's get Florida fans and LSU fans conjured up to try to spend some of this money at 18-1.
By the way, I'll take your action on those.
Right. No, I think I'll take action on a lot of them, but it can always happen is what I'm saying.
Yeah, but look, but as far as like Jazz Hatcher and some of y'all are like, hey, Georgia's got rat poison too. Hey, the great place to be on this particular issue, if you're a Georgia fan, if you're an Auburn fan, Alabama's got all the rat poison. Even though Georgia's the reigning SEC champion, they're like, 2-1 to win this thing in 2018. Alabama's got the burden of toting the heavy favorite here. You know what? Enjoy that this season. Georgia and Auburn at least have some grounds to say, hey, nobody believed in us.
No, they should. And that's how they should feel. And every football team should have that feeling of, hey, it's us against the world. Don't pick us to win anything. We want to make sure that we're the guys that are going after it, and, for a couple of different angles. My only point is that Mississippi State at 12-1 and South Carolina at 30-1, that's Vegas trying to say, hey, listen, let's see if we can get some of these bets rolling.
By the way, I think I actually misread Jazz Hatcher's comment. I thought he was saying I had to eat Georgia's rat poison. He's saying that I am actually the human personification of Georgia's rat poison. I don't know if that's fair and true. Come on. I mean, there's a lot of you Alabama fans are trying to deflect the fact that you're a huge favorite in the SEC. Heavy is the head that wears the crown.
You guys are the reigning champs. Like, we can't be that heavy. You guys are the reigning champs of the SEC. We're trying to knock y'all off, man. Bama's trying to knock Georgia off.
Tyler Mann, by the way, in the YouTube comment section says Georgia and Alabama should play more in the regular season. I mean, as much as it'd be a tough game to play, I would love to see these two teams play.
9-game conference schedule.
Yeah,
it answers so many questions. I will stand on that stage for the rest of the time.
MJD over in the YouTube comment section mentions one of those Georgia incoming freshmen, Brenton Cox, who Georgia flipped from Ohio State back before the
Bama really wanted.
Yeah, a guy that Bama really wanted. That's the guy that Nick Saban was entertaining when he found out that Alabama was going to be in the college football playoff. Cox is one of those guys for Georgia that I do think plays a lot as a freshman.
Yeah, and I think there's going to be a couple. And we can point to, possibly a guy like Tyson Campbell, some of those guys in secondary action when you get in those nickel and dime packages. I think you're going to have guys like that. I don't think you keep some of those guys off the field. And, there's going to be probably a couple wide receivers, maybe some running backs.
All right, we are running late. Item number 4 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. I thought that Chris Johnson from Sports Illustrated had a really interesting look at some of the first-year coaches of the SEC here and the outlook for each of those guys. And we'll probably, over the course of the next couple of days, talk about a few of these. But one of the names that I wanted to point out today is what Chris Johnson from Sports Illustrated had to say about Tennessee coach Jeremy Pruitt and what Sports Illustrated believes is a reasonable expectation for the Vols here in 2018. Let me read this to you from Chris Johnson, SI. He says there's a good chance Pruitt's first season in Knoxville is going to be smoother than the slipshod. Some of y'all make fun of some of the words I use. I've never even heard the word slipshod before. I'm not even sure is that some sort of profanity? Nonetheless, he says a slipshod process through which the school settled on him as Butch Jones' successor. But it may not be by much. Johnson says this looks like a multi-year retooling project. Bowl eligibility feels like a reasonable goal. So he says things were so bad with the hiring of Greg Schiano, it may settle down a bit after that was botched and Pruitt gets the chance to be on the field here in 2018, but it still could be a little chaotic. They just better hope they make a bowl here in 2018. So I'm going to ask you that question flat out. Do you think Tennessee plays in a bowl this season?
I think they do.
Really?
I actually think they do, and that's really a nod from me to Jeremy Pruitt, and that's as far as I can take with that. I think that somebody at some point, I think the development is there from Jeremy Pruitt, that he knows how to develop players, and I don't know who it's going to be, but some team that he's not supposed to beat goes down this year. And I think that's just where I base my observation on that, and I base it on that alone, is that, hey, listen, the over-under is going to be 6.5, 5.5. We look at that Florida game, that's probably a game Florida should win. That's a game that I think Florida should win anyways. But I think Tennessee is going to topple somebody this year. Be it late in the season, Tennessee is going to knock somebody off to where you say, whoa, they probably shouldn't have won that game, but they did, and I think that puts them over the hump.
So forget the 5 and 7 teams that go to bowls because of like special circumstances. Right. Let's assume it takes 6 to get there, and every win counts towards the 6 now, right? For the most part. So I'm going to give you East Tennessee State. I'm going to give you UTEP. That gets you to 2. I'm going to give you Charlotte. That gets you to 3. I can't give you any more, though. I'm not telling you. I'm not telling you that Tennessee goes 3 and 9. I'm saying before the season begins, there's nothing but those 3 non-conference games where I say that's an automatic win for the Vols.
No, I agree.
East Tennessee State, UTEP, and Charlotte. I mean, Florida is at best a toss-up. Georgia, they may get tossed out. At Auburn the following week after a week off in between. Alabama at South Carolina. Kentucky, even that's been a tough game as of late. Missouri at home, that may be as must-win as ever been. At Vanderbilt, if I've got that many toss-ups, now you may, and I'm not even sure they're toss-ups, I'm just saying they're hard to win.
Right.
You got to find enough toss-ups where you can split them and get to 6.
I agree. Now follow me down this when I talk about this. Okay. I'll put West Virginia in the toss-up.
Are you crazy? They're 7-point underdogs.
No, I'm saying
that's not a toss-up.
What I'm saying is I'm putting them in the category of somebody Pruitt has to upset in order to get them over the hump.
Okay,
right?
yeah.
This is the category of people that Jeremy Pruitt's going to have to shock somebody. You got West Virginia, you got Georgia, you got Auburn, you got Alabama, you got at South Carolina. Jeremy Pruitt, if he can pull off one of those games, aside from the rest of them, because if he wins the rest of them, that puts him in a bowl game anyways. I'm just telling you that one of those games that he probably won't be favored in, Jeremy Pruitt's going to win this year.
See, I think that you and I are looking at this very differently. I'm looking at games that you need to turn into must-win games. I mean, I wouldn't even talk about Georgia or Auburn right now, and I probably wouldn't even get too into the West Virginia thing.
That's fair.
I'm looking at the final 3 games of the season. Can you find a way to sweep? Now, by that point in time, you're not a first-year coach anymore. You've coached 9 games. And by that point in time, a lot of these young players that you're playing, they're seasoned players. Can you really flex and sweep Kentucky, Missouri, Vanderbilt, Commodore is the only game of that trio that's on the road? That's where it comes down to right there.
Right.
Can you show some muster against what's probably going to be a bad Kentucky team? I'm not high on Missouri, by the way. That's Derek Dooley coming back to Neyland Stadium, and then at Vanderbilt.
By the way, Barry Odom's gone by that time. By the time they play.
By the way, and if Tennessee loses to Vanderbilt, then just shame on you. Then just get off the field.
I agree with you. Listen. You got Charlotte, you got UTEP, you got East Tennessee. Those are 3 games that are locks in my opinion. Now, Missouri can give you a problem. Listen, you don't have that much talent back there in your secondary, but I just think that Jeremy Pruitt winning Kentucky, Missouri, Vanderbilt, East Tennessee, UTEP, Charlotte, that gets you at 6 alone.
Yeah.
I have to think that he's going to get to at least that level.
Brooks Glanton on the YouTube comment section says, RTR, Mike, how's it going, BA? Brooks, we appreciate you checking on the show today. Logan Westman also says that West Virginia can beat Tennessee, especially this year, with almost no defense whatsoever. Greer could tear them to pieces. I do think that Will Greer's going to have a big day against that Tennessee defense. I gather, based on some sort of whispering and reading between the lines for Tennessee back in the spring, I don't think that Pruitt thinks his defense is very good.
No.
But I do think that Tennessee needs to score some points against West Virginia.
Yeah.
I keep going back to that. Early in the season, show me you can score some points. If
Yeah.
you score some points, then maybe it's good for you the rest of the way.
Yeah, no, I think that Jeremy Pruitt has to turn that game into a defensive game, and I don't know that they have the guns for it. I don't know if they have the secondary for it. I don't know if they're going to have the pass rush for it, but I think that's what Jeremy Pruitt has to hope for. He has to hope that his offense can get the ball and get the running game going good enough to where he can win that time of possession, get it 38 minutes on his side, and make sure Will Greer just doesn't have the ball as much as he wants.
All right, item number 5 here in our SEC Country Live First and 10 list, and believe me when I tell you, we have got to pick up the pace. We got a lot of news around the SEC here today. That's why we're spending as much time as we are, I guess. Our buddy Benjamin Walk had some great reporting over the last 24 hours, although it's bad news for Auburn. Coyote Odell, I was going to get that thing dead blasted.
That's a tough one, man.
Let me try that one more time. Coyote Oladele. Coyote Oladele. What Benjamin Walk writes is that 2018 signee, it's a 4-star defensive lineman, Oladele, will no longer enroll at Auburn. Oladele told me, this is Benjamin Walk here, that he's still exploring options for this fall and will make a decision in the next few weeks. These kinds of things are almost always academic related. How big of a blow do you think this is for Auburn?
I actually am not sure if this is academic related. From what I've been hearing around the Auburn scene and just talking to people that are related with this program, it has something to do. This is a kid that did not play his senior year of high school football.
Okay.
Couldn't get his visa situated coming from Nigeria. For that point, he was not able to really get some things situated with. I don't think this is a bad grade situation. I just think that it's something.
Yeah, let me clarify. Sometimes it can be transferred.
Right, exactly.
We see the same thing both with American-born kids as well. When you go from, and this is more common than it used to be, when you go multiple high schools over the course of your career, when it's all said and done, collecting all that data at the end for a sort of a clean transcript to move on to college, sometimes that can be challenging. So let me be very clear here. It would be wrong for me to insinuate that he didn't pass some sort of class.
Right.
But when you talk about leaving one country, coming to the United States, and kind of collecting all that data together, that's where these transcript issues can be pretty tough here.
Yeah, that's where I think that he's really having the hang up, and I don't think this is a crazy significant blow to to the Auburn signing class. This was a low-ranked 4-star kind of guy.
They're already pretty deep on the defensive line,
and they're going to be fine on the defensive line when it comes to this year. You just have to look a little bit farther down the road if you really want to see an impact. But I don't think this is one of those things that becomes really impactful on what Auburn's trying to do.
This is one of those things, though, where every SEC fan, this is becoming one of those sort of tent poles on the calendar where starting in early June, you start counting your freshmen who show up on campus. Then by mid-July, you sort of start counting who's not here yet. Florida's dealt with this. Georgia's dealt with this. Auburn dealing with this right now. Other SEC schools probably almost for sure have as well. I mean, unfortunately here, this is one of those things that in the summer you have to pay a little bit of attention to. And with all the media covering this stuff now and the message board rumors, it's almost become impossible to ignore.
Yeah, and I mentioned this yesterday. This has become kind of the second SEC season, right? The SEC recruiting season. A lot of people don't pay that much attention to this, but it's just as big a deal as signing day. Hey, you sign the guys back in February, you get them on the campus in the middle of the summer. And a lot of people don't pay attention to that part of it, but every year we see 1, 2, 3 guys from each signing class who just don't make it.
Item number 6 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list, a classic bit of trolling from a former Alabama star here. There was a Twitter account showing some video of the Kentucky special teams doing a little dancing. In fact, let me show you the dance and the tweet that sort of starts this all here. Take a look at this on your screen of Kentucky having a little fun on its special teams. Kind of get it going with the dancing here just a bit. Let's watch this. The check down sends this out. It looks a little bit like what Mississippi State did for a few years here. You see, Kentucky kind of getting going here. And the question from the @checkdown on Twitter was, hey, would this intimidate you before kickoff? And Landon Collins, the former Alabama star, had a very, I think, to the point, matter-of-fact response to this. Let me show you Landon Collins, who on Twitter says, no, this doesn't intimidate me because this is Kentucky.
Yeah.
How funny is this from Collins?
Yeah, it's funny, and it's definitely blunt. It's definitely to the point. I don't love it. It's one of those things where it's just not my personality to say something like that. But listen, Landon Collins is NFL defensive MVP or something along those lines, so he gets to say stuff like that.
I don't have a problem with that. Don't be super serious about
No,
that.
I mean, I'm not. Listen, I didn't, get on Twitter and say, oh man, don't say that. But it's just not. I don't know.
I mean, but
they're Kentucky. I mean, there's people, there's players on their team too.
But thank you, Coach. They're all on scholarship as well. I do realize that. But there is something to be said for if you're going to dance like that before a kickoff, you better take somebody's head off.
No,
you better take somebody to the ground when you go make a tackle.
Yeah, it's not in my personality to talk trash on Twitter about something like that. But it's also not. I'm not the guy going out swinging the arms on the kickoff team either. That never got me. I was always like, I don't care what you're doing.
I know this is going to make me sound 1,000 years old, but I do believe when it comes to college football, there's an inverse relationship in terms of the number of dances you're doing before a play and the number of plays you're making once the whistle blows. The NFL is kind of a different thing. That's a little bit more part of the fabric of the NFL. For the most part, the best college football teams and players seem to be content to let their swag be shown by how they're playing.
Listen, I've been on kickoff return teams in the NFL, and I've seen this bruising 250-pound running, linebacker running at me. It wasn't dancing, and the guys that really, the guys that really scare you when you're on that wedge are the ones that aren't dancing. That's the guy you should be really, really concerned about.
The guy that looks like he's ready to go out and make that tackle. That is such a
guy whose
good
face
point.
is red, and that's who you should be scared about.
All right, item number 7 here on our SEC Country Line First and 10 list, a very popular topic on our program over the last couple of years has been former LSU running back Darius Guice, now a member of the Washington Redskins, and now that he's in the NFL, he's got more money than he's used to having, and what does he want to do with that? Well, he does the thing I think a lot of us have dreamed about one day being able to do. Take care of your mom, surprise her with a brand new automobile. This is a pretty touching video that Guice shares from his Twitter account here, and I think if you're an LSU fan, this will give you all kinds of positive feelings here. Take a look at Darius Guice.
Y'all about to surprise me. Dumb way. You so up to no good, told me 3-4 days.
That's a nice car.
Go check it out.
Is it a Volvo? Yeah. I can't tell if it's an Audi. Is that an Audi? Or maybe it is a Volvo. Is that a Volvo?
I want to say it's a Volvo.
Or is that a Porsche? Lord heavens.
I don't know. I can't see it. Lincoln? I don't know. It's a
can't
nice car, though, either
Somebody
way.
tell us what that is. I mean, it's actually kind of a shame that I don't even know what nice cars are anymore.
Yeah, let's see if we can see it
all
right
right,
here.
that's a Cadillac, maybe.
Is it? Man,
Is that what that was?
I don't know. That emblem's messing me up, but
how cool of a
Steven
story.
really says it's a Jag.
Oh, I see. Yeah, you can see the Jaguar logo now.
Yeah.
You can see the Jaguar logo.
That makes
on there.
sense because that's a nice car. Man.
Listen, now you got to go to England and get a spark plug, but nonetheless.
Yeah, he's got the money to do that.
Yeah,
Hey, listen, he's
but
going to be all right.
That's a cool moment, right? Especially
Great
for a
moment.
guy that got beaten up pretty bad over the course of the draft process, had a lot of weird things said about him.
Yeah.
To be able to do that for your mom right there like that, I mean, that's the kind of thing that you dream about.
And then I remember us covering it after the draft. It was like, listen, from everything I've heard about this kid, from him visiting people over Christmas break to him doing whatever it is, I've never heard anything bad come at Darius Guice. And so it was head scratching back then, and you see stuff like that, it's even more head scratching for me now.
Yeah, thanks to all the guys and gals in the comment section reminding us that is a Jag there. Ty Pham says love it. And yeah, it does. It kind of gives you a good vibe. And you've kind of been in that position. I don't know if you're buying Jaguars for anybody back in the day, but
No.
But it's
Might have bought a new set of tires for my mom.
I guess I will ask you this. This is sort of taking what was a good story and turning into something bad. Like when you first started making NFL money, did you have just people just, expecting you to take up every check, every
well,
day
yeah,
or whatever?
that happens for sure. You definitely have people that kind of lean back and it's assumed, and you have to kind of set people straight in a lot of different ways. Say, hey, listen, that ain't gonna be the way things fly. But most of the people that I was involved with, most of my friends and family didn't expect that. So.
Well, that's really nice to
Yeah,
hear,
it's good.
and great job by Darius Guice there, doing something I think a lot of us would one day like to be able to do. All right, item number 8 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Former Florida coach Steve Spurrier has been an outspoken proponent of his alma mater for a long time. Of course, he was a former Gator great player as well. And he was on the radio show in Orlando, hosted by longtime Orlando Sentinel columnist, now I guess radio host, Mike Bianchi. Now, the reason why Spurrier goes on the show is to talk about his role in this new football league. I still don't understand all the details of this football league, when they're playing, or, I don't know much about that. I frankly don't even really care. The issue that I'm interested in is what Spurrier has to say about this upcoming Florida Gator team. And Spurrier kind of towing the company line here of, you're not going to believe how strong these guys look. But then he goes on to add a pretty bold prediction to what he sees and has seen from the Gators so far this summer. If you're a Florida fan, what do you make of Steve Spurrier saying this? Take a listen.
I've seen the guys in the weight room. Obviously, a complete different attitude in there than in the past. I think Coach McElwain's strength coach is a little bit of a quiet guy. A little bit not much yelling and pushing and this, that, and the other. The strength coach, Dan Mullen's got, Coach Savage, he's one of the best. And the players really respond to him. And they like being pushed. They like being getting the most out of them and so forth. So I really think the attitude is excellent. And you got to remember, last year, about this time of the year, we had about 10, 11 guys suspended. And Scarlett, the best running back, missed the whole year. He's back. It's a pretty good-looking team. I know Dan doesn't want to get too big on predictions or anything, but I really think this team can certainly compete with Georgia for the Eastern Division. I really do.
So how about Spurrier there throwing that in there in? He thinks that Florida competes with Georgia for the Eastern Division. I would suggest that he thinks he's doing Dan Mullen a favor here, but I don't think that Mullen would necessarily view it that way. I don't know that anybody even still takes Steve Spurrier seriously on stuff like this anymore, but a couple things from that for me are interesting. The fact that, once again, Florida has really gone all in on how much Savage, the strength and conditioning coach, is going to pay big dividends for them. That's really a part of their off-season chatter here. And then, seems like he's pretty high on Florida. How do you respond to what Spurrier has to say there?
I agree with what he's saying, and I personally am in just listening to the chatter. I'm kind of all in on Nick Savage. It's like we haven't even seen it on the field yet, but I'm like, hey, listen, they got the talent. If Nick Savage is the guy like they're talking about, then they could possibly be
My
a
only
very good football
skepticism
team.
about Savage, let me just be clear about this, is how much can a body change over the course of just a few months?
Right.
Listen, I certainly need to lose a lot of weight. It's not going to happen overnight, though. You know what I'm saying? It's I'm not going to come here 2 months from now and say, hey, I've changed my life completely. I think it's the same thing for football players who, if they weren't, physically strong enough a year ago to say in just a few months' time, now they are every bit as strong as they need to be. If it really was a problem that cost Florida games a year ago, it's the kind of thing that likely can't be fixed over the course of just a couple of months.
No, I disagree, and I think it's something that it can definitely do a U-turn. And to me, it's not that anybody wasn't strong; it was that they weren't well conditioned. It wasn't, it was the fourth quarter. I don't think in the first quarter, when you watch Florida's offensive line, defensive line, they had no problem moving people. It's not like they weren't getting off the ball. It's that they weren't that next level, the one that gets them over the hump, the one that gets them, from a 7-point game to a 14-point game, and gets at the end of the game them pulling away. I think that can definitely be attained within the course of a year for sure.
Do you think that it's reasonable to say Florida in the conversation of contenders in the East.
I think
he mentions Georgia by name. By the way, noted Spurrier as a noted Georgia hater.
Yeah, I think it definitely. It's not out of the realm of possibility. I don't have Florida winning the East. I think Florida's going to be a better football team than most think. I don't have them winning the East. I'm kind of with you, though, where it's like he's kind of ramping up things for Dan Mullen a little bit.
Yeah, Mullen can't love it, right?
Well, to me, it almost falls in the same category we talked about with Les Miles earlier, where he kind of comes on and says, boy, you know what, listen, I never had a game where I thought I was going to lose.
Yeah.
And Steve Spurrier's like, well, they're really going to compete in the East.
Yeah.
Dan Mullen's like,
I think just slow down on that a little bit
for a second.
Bull Gator, though, in the YouTube comment section says Spurrier knows football. So it sounds like at least one Florida fan says if Spurrier says it, I believe it, and we'll see how it plays out. Esteban Esteves, also an LSU fan on our YouTube comment section, says Dan Mullen's been known for upsetting teams. And that kind of goes back to the point that you were making, I think you were making, about what Steve Spurrier had to say. At Florida, you don't really get to be the plucky underdog very much. Even if you're a point spread underdog, Florida fans view themselves as this big macro college football power. You don't get to sneak up on people at Florida the way that you would be able to at a place like Mississippi State.
Yeah, no, you definitely can't. And I think that Florida is going to have to try to take that route, though. I think they're going to have to try to play that underdog card because for everything you think Florida is as a football factory or DBU or whatever Florida fans want to call what that program is, the spotlight is on Georgia this year. And so maybe in a way there is the opportunity for them to say, hey, listen, nobody's paying attention to us. You won 4 games a year ago. Nobody thinks you're worth anything. Be able to sneak up in the beginning, I think there definitely is a possibility for that. I just don't think it lasts over the course of a year.
All right, item number 9 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. You may remember last week, Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm dealt with an issue, broke a bone in his non-throwing hand, stemming from an accident he had while being a part of a, water skiing incident with some friends on a lake in the state of Georgia. And there had been some chatter around Georgia about, is this something that Fromm, the quarterback of UGA, ought to be doing? Should he be taking more precaution not to injure himself, getting hurt on a boat the way that he did? Keeping that in mind, that some people were saying that, is it ironic or is it intentional that this week Georgia puts out this video, of which I'm going to show you a little bit here, of Kirby Smart doing much like we've seen Alabama coach Nick Saban doing, partying with some of, not partying, that's the wrong word, but having some fun with some of his players on a jet ski. First of all, great video shot there of Kirby Smart driving the boat. You see the players there. This video was released by Georgia this week. Is this just a coincidence this comes out a few days after the Fromm injury? Or is this Georgia saying, there's Justin Fields, by the way, is this Georgia saying, we got our quarterbacks back who may have gotten hurt?
It could possibly be that they got their quarterbacks back. By the way, it's Kirby Smart definitely reaching into the Saban bag of tricks, in my opinion, and coming out with.
Except Kirby's boat didn't run out of gas.
Well, he didn't.
That out.
Didn't run out of gas, fuel injectors, whatever it may be. It definitely didn't. And so he's definitely got a good-looking boat too, man. I really love that boat.
How about that float thing there? That looks like it'd be fun.
It's one of those that can topple over. Is that how that kind of works?
I don't know.
Kind of like spin in a circle. But
yeah, I don't
anyways, aside from all that, I definitely think it's calculated on his part to say, hey, listen, this is the Jake Fromm thing, whatever. We're not mad about it.
Kirby Smart did speak about this at least briefly yesterday. He was at Lake Oconee for Bruce Arians, who's the former Arizona Cardinals coach. Kirby's a friend of his. Kirby participating in his celebrity golf tournament, and the subject came up of the Jake Fromm injury, and Smart made it known pretty clear that the manner in which it happened is not something that was a problem for him. Here's Kirby discussing that.
We do what we do as kids. I did the same thing when I was playing, and a lot of people do that. I don't think you live your life scared and worried about that. You want to be safe. You want to take precaution, but you don't let things like that control your lifestyle.
So he says, I don't think you live your life scared. You don't let things like that control your lifestyle. I guess here's the one thing I would admit. While I don't have a problem with what Jake Fromm did, part of my belief as a coach would be I don't try to stop this because I know I can't. But if I thought I could, I guess I probably would.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you can't get away with it, though. I mean,
you can't
bubble wrap your players.
It's terrible for recruiting.
Yeah, it'd be awful.
There's no way to sort of take precaution against every possible injury you could have. But like Sony Michel, the ATV, I mean, I would have probably told him don't ride the ATV. The boat seems a little bit different, but statistically speaking, boats are probably more dangerous than ATVs.
Getting snapped in the hand by a tow rope's a different story, too. I mentioned this yesterday, and I have yet to hear any former college football player or any former athlete really say, boy, you know what, he shouldn't have been doing that. It's not something you can do. You can't go down that road. You can't ask players to put it on the line on the practice field and make sure they're not having any fun.
Yeah, I guess in a weird way, not to get too deep in the subject, but to me, and this may be like hypocritical and wrong, but I view boating as different than, like, say, snowboarding. If he goes snowboarding in Colorado, I'd be like, what are you doing that for? That seems dangerous. Boating, and maybe just because I live near a lake, I know a lot of people who boat, that just seems a lot safer to me. Once again, Sony Michel, the former Georgia running back who got hurt a couple years ago on a four-wheeler, those things just seem like walking, trips to the emergency room. I would tell Sony Michel, don't do that. Somehow boating just seems safer to me.
Yeah, I mean, it goes under the category of like a motorcycle. You know what I'm saying? Like, you probably shouldn't ride a motorcycle. And I find it curious that there's a lot of programs around the SEC that have their players riding scooters. That always kind of makes me cringe. But
Georgia's had a couple players get hurt riding these small
Florida's
scooters.
had a couple
There's
too.
also nowhere to park in Athens, so that's part of the issue.
Right. I think that's every college campus for sure.
All right, let me do item number 10 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. I thought this was really funny because come to find out, my reaction was the same as everyone else's. I want you to take a look at this right here. As Arkansas releases a brand new football uniform here, and you see what I'm assuming is an actor. I don't believe this is a player. He's showing off the new uniform there, and I'm a guy that watches a lot of SEC football. I watch a lot of Arkansas football. This brand new uniform that's being shown off here, I don't see any differences whatsoever. This looks like the exact same Arkansas uniform that I've seen every Saturday now, going back however long. Well, it's kind of cool to find out that my reaction to this is very similar to everyone else's, because after Arkansas releases this video on social media, they were, I'm assuming, forced to then release another tweet explaining what the differences on the video were. Let me show you another tweet here from the folks there at the Arkansas football department where they sort of explain, okay, here are the differences. Let me show you this here. You can see that. Here's the checklist. Here's what's new. The helmet, returning to the, quote, pearl cardinal look. Jersey, removed the white chest tusks. Pants, stripe was moved up to connect at the waist. Cleats, white, and they put white in like italics for some reason. I don't know if that's a typo or what. Is this a botched uniform reveal if they had to come back and then explain what was different about it?
Listen, to remove the white chest tusk just looks like you moved in the sleeves to me. I mean, it's kind of, the same whole thing when it comes up with that.
What is cardinal pearl, by the way?
I'm not sure.
I think that I've been told that's like going away from like the matte helmet to more of like a shiny, glossy helmet.
Possibly so. And
I probably care about this kind of stuff more than you do.
Well, I like the white cleats.
I'm sort of a uniform guy.
I like the white cleat things. To me is a good thing. I wish that Bama would allow their players to wear white cleats, but it's black and it's going to stay that way.
Blind Squirrel Sports says, unless Arkansas is releasing NCAA-approved extra years of eligibility for Darren McFadden, I'm not impressed. That's actually a pretty funny line from Blind Squirrel there. Esteban Esteves also says the color on the uniforms is brighter. That's an LSU fan, by the way, who seems to at least be a little bit impressed by them. So the new uniform. It kind of reminds me of that video. Do you remember we showed that video last year of like Texas A&M like teasing a new uniform?
Yeah.
Like the video was like so jumpy and jerky, I couldn't even tell what it was.
And anyway, Snoop Dogg had it afterwards or showed it off.
I think there was something like that. I think you have to be sort of really, really young to even notice the difference.
And I honestly don't know that it's a big deal in the end. I don't think anybody's going to notice Arkansas's uniforms being different on the field.
Timothy Allen checking in from Northwest Arkansas, though. Timothy, thanks for checking in on the program today. All right. We always look to close the show the same way every day. We're always looking for champions of life. And today, this is actually kind of a cool thing. I don't know if you saw this, but Travis Pastrana over the weekend, I guess, motorcycle rider of some acclaim.
Yeah, used to be a NASCAR driver, by the way.
There you go. Travis Pastrana used to be a NASCAR driver. Well, he goes out to Las Vegas to mimic the great Evel Knievel. Now, I'm a little too young to really remember the heyday of Evel Knievel, but I knew who Evel Knievel was. The motorcycle rider that wore the white jumpsuit and in Las Vegas made some famous jumps. Well, Travis Pastrana took his time over the weekend to sort of see if he could copy that. And you know what? The results here are actually pretty cool. As aired on the History Channel, take a look at this. So there goes Pastrana. Now, I've been told this is a more powerful bike than what Evel Knievel used. Well, that is one heck of a jump, man.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm not really that impressed.
Are you crazy?
Well, I didn't like it. The ramp's like 40 foot wide. I mean, it's like.
I mean, I'm not telling you I'd buy this on pay-per-view. It's not that interesting to me, but it's a great visual right here.
Okay, let me give you background though. They did a 3-hour show for this. Like,
I wouldn't watch that. I wouldn't watch that with your eyes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like a 3-hour build-up, and it's cool.
And what I've been told by purists is the bike that Pastrana is using here is easier than the one that Evel Knievel made his legendary jumps with.
It looks easier. Like it doesn't. I know it's difficult.
Did you just say that it looks easy?
No, I said it looks easier. Like you were saying, the bike seems
just like a powerful engine.
Yeah.
But still, when you jump from one ramp to the other, let me put you in midair like that.
No, I'm not saying I would do it. I'm just saying that I've seen it happen before.
Mr. Big Talk all of a sudden. All right, hey, check out the podcast. It's available for you on all the various podcast channels. Right after the show's done, you'll be able to find that. Also, share the show with your friends. Let folks know that we're talking about the SEC, and we love doing it with you. Your comments make it a lot of fun. We appreciate your interaction during the show, and we'll see you tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for another episode of SEC Country Live. Y'all have a great day.